Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 13. In this episode, I'm going to show you how you can mark students automatically as attendant or absent simply by selecting them and marking them present or absent or any feature. We're going to also show you how to automatically filter based on rooms, based on teachers, simply by making the change, and also viewing by either one, by viewing by room or by teacher or by class type. We've also built in the navigation. Now we can move back and forth based on those school work days. It's going to be an amazing training. I've got so much to cover. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. We've got a ton to cover today. We've got class filters, we've got student filters, we've got all kinds to show you on this day. We're also going to show you the navigation because we've got a lot of navigation. Last week we went over drag and drop. This week we've got the navigation all built in ready for you. So I'm going to show you that every step of the way, every little bit of code, every line of code, every formula and function. We're going to show you. We're going to make this live. This is going to be the day view. When we select it, we're going to be able to track scores. We can put in different scores, automatically track them on a per exam basis. We'll be able to add an exam here, select an exam. We'll also be able to make changes here, and of course view by and filter and navigation. We got so much to cover, and we're going to try to pack it all in this training. If you do like these trainings, I just ask a few things from you. They're always free, but if you could go ahead and click the subscribe button down below, and don't forget the notification icon bell. That'll get you an email when I do create these trainings each and every week for you. This workbook is absolutely free. All you need to do is click on the links down below with either your email or with Facebook Messenger. We'll get that over right away to you. I've got a really cool announcement just released this week. We've got an amazing promotion going on with our mentorship. As you know, our mentorship program has been going on for quite a while. We're building an incredible accounting application, and I wanted to bring that to you. I wanted to give you a ton of value with a tiny little price, so I've dropped it considerably. For the first 5 weeks, it is now only $7. That's $7 going to get you 5 weeks, nearly 8 hours of training, and it's going to get you a great foundation for our mentorship. No obligation. Continue. If you don't, that's fine. I'm glad you got the offer. Tons of downloads and bonuses with the $7. I'll include the link down below if you like that. I'd appreciate it. All right, let's get started. We've got so much to cover. This is the sample. We're not going to be working with this. This just gives you a heads up of what's going on. So I'm going to save it and close that. And we're going to take right off where we left off last week. So we've got our scheduling right here. This is the one we were working on last week. We did drag and drop. We covered that. And today we're going to get all this functionality. We're going to get these filters. We're going to get the students. We're going to get the attendance. Let's start on the attendance. Now, I want to keep track of who attended and when, right? We've got present things, and I want to be able to select on them and to show which students are present, or maybe which students are absent or sick or vacation. I also want to just basically put in a drop-down list here and to show that. So let's do that first. What is this data validation? We're going to drop this down for now and take a look at the data validation. And we see that this specific data validation is the attendance status. So I'm just going to copy that, and I want to carry that over for all the way down to M102. That way we can then bring this over a little bit so you can see the row numbers here. M all the way, let's just go through 102. And so what I'm going to do is, again, choose that data validation, make sure that validation is brought down all the way throughout. So that's going to be the attendance status, because I want to be able to select it and I want to be able to save that attendance status. So when I click on that course or click on it, I want that attendance status, whatever we just put there, I want it saved. Obviously now it's not saving if I click there. So how are we going to save it? And I also want to put in a score. If I put in an exam, we're going to be adding exams in the coming weeks. If I select an exam here, I want to put a score for that exam, and I want that exam and I want that score saved. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can do that with a separate database. And so why don't we add that database in right now, and we'll create a brand new sheet. Sheet and database are the same here. So here's it is. I'm going to call this just the attendance database. Going to keep it simple, although it's going to track more than that. Attendance database. And before I do that, I want to make sure I'm going to go into the VBA code and I'm going to rename it so that it's exactly the same. We always keep track. So this new sheet 2 is what I have. That's what I just created, the attendance database. So what I'm going to do is go into the properties here. And then I'm just going to change it right here. I'm going to change it to the same thing, attendance database. Okay, so that way they're both renamed and they're named perfectly, exactly the same, so we can work with that. Okay, we can close up, drop that down. So what do I want to keep track inside this? Let's just give it a name first up at the top. We'll call this the student attendance and score database, and score, because we're going to keep track of the score database. So we want to keep track of that. What do I want? I'm going to have an attendance ID. It's kind of important because it's good to track in case we clear it out. I always want something there. It's always nice to have that, although we may not be using that specifically in this. So along with the attendance ID, I've got to know what the lesson ID, I have to know. We're keeping track of this on a per lesson basis, right? So I'm going to drag this all the way over here because we're going to work with it. So I like to have my sheets when I work with them together. So I'm going to put this right next to the scheduling here and I'll bring it over here. I want it right next to the scheduling. So that way we can go back and forth really easily. So we have a lesson ID. Our lesson ID is going to be tracked in specific right here inside lesson ID. B10 is going to keep track of that. So what I want to do is I want to know which lesson. This is not necessarily a class, but a lesson. So we're going to have the lesson ID. Very important. I also want to have the student name. What is the student name? That we'll use not so much. We're going to use the student ID a little bit more, but it's good to have the student name there just so we can check it. And again, I want the student ID. That ID is very, very key. I also want the attendance status. We need to save that, the attendance status. What is the status? Is it present or not? And also, I want to know what exam was assigned. So we'll call this the assigned exam or test, right? We're going to be creating those a little bit later on. Tests and exams and quizzes and assignments, all of them are going to be in the same. We'll be able to assign. I also want to know what is the grade or the score that they received on that. This is very important because inside the dashboard, when we get to that point, we're going to need to know exactly all of the specifically assigned exams, tests, quizzes assigned to a specific student ID, and we're going to be able to add this. So that's really important. So I'll just merge and center this. We'll give it a color. Nobody's going to see this, so we're not going to worry too much about what it looks like because it's not so important, but a little bit just so for clarity purposes. And that's going to be it. So we also want to keep some named ranges for these. I think that's kind of important. And we're going to be using formulas. So it is. So we'll do, let's say, at least 2 or 3 named ranges. I want one for the lesson ID and the student ID. We're going to need those. I'm going to need to keep track of those. So let's add in those right now. And so what I want to do is basically just create a dynamic name range as we have always done and as we've been doing in this series, because that's going to help us keep track. So into the formulas name manager, I want new, and each one we'll call this attend, and then this is going to be ID. Again, we're using an offset equals offset. We're going to start, of course, with that header row there. We're going to go run row down 2 commas and then count A. I want to count the header row and everything down. Let's say 9999, a large row, and then -1 to subtract from the header, comma 1. If you've been following these series, you know exactly how to do these by now because I've done it almost 100 times in this series alone. Okay, great. So we check the dance against to make sure that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that because I want to have one for the lesson ID and I want to have one for the student ID. So again, let's do attendance, and then what we'll do is under this underscore and then lesson ID, and then down here we're going to put that, except I'm going to change the column. I pasted that in. Now remember, original was A. This one we're going to focus on B because this is lesson. So I'm going to tab over that, make sure those dance ants are on the 2, which is correct. Click OK. And then what I want to do is I want to have one for the student ID. That's going to be in column D. So attendant, just as we did before, and then in this one underscore student ID. That's sufficient enough. We're going to use the same column to count. That's why I like those attendance IDs. It's required, and that way we can get a proper count. This one's going to be in column D. So again, D, changing that and going over, okay, we're good on that, and that's it. We got 3 of them. We got attendance ID, attendance lesson ID, and we have attendance student ID. Attendance status is something else. That's in the admin screen, okay? So we have those 3, so we're good to go. So what I want to do is I want to be able to create a formula, and I want to know the row of this. So what do I mean by that? So I want to know, has it been added yet? So when I'm in the schedule, if I've got this student, I'd like to know if that information for that student, whether it's an attendance or whether it's a score, has it been added to the database? If it has been added to the database, I would like that row to show up right in here, the enrolled. Let's just call this, let's rename this attendance database row. So I think it's a little bit more clear. So there's a formula that's going to help us to do that now that we have that. So how do we use that? Well, basically what I want to do is I want to determine first, I've got the name here, but I really want to focus on the student ID because it is the student ID that is never going to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up this name. I'm going to extract from the student database the student ID. I'm going to use some project. So I want to know what row is this student ID in, and is it there, and also where's the lesson ID? What row is the lesson ID and the student ID match? Now the lesson ID is here, it's in B10. So let's put that in there. So let's put that in just so we know what row, just so we can make sure we get a formula. So I'm going to put the lesson ID as 1, and I need to put the student ID in here. So if we go into the student database, I think it's at the end here, and take a look at the Fred Fretters, we see that he's first and he's got a student ID of 1. So if I put his student ID in, so what I want to do is I want a formula. Let me show you that. I'll go back in here to where we were inside the attendance getting large now. So what I want to do is I want a formula where the lesson ID and the student ID are there. I want to return the row. I want 3. I want to show, and if it's not found, just show nothing. So that's what I want here. So if we've selected lesson ID 1 and we have a student ID 1, I want to show 3 right here. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that with a formula. We can use a sum product formula. So again, we'll use the named ranges that we just created. So equals if error, right, in case there's an error we're going to use sum product. So sum product, what are we going to use? We're going to use double parentheses here. And then I want to do, first of all, I want to know what the lesson ID is going to be equal to what? It's going to be equal to B10. That's what I want to know right here. And of course, we need to make sure that that's absolute. So we're going to use F4. Okay, so that's one part. We know we're looking for the match, but what else do we need? I need to know the student ID, right? I want a match of that student ID. So we're going to do, again, attendance, lesson, student ID, right? This time we're looking for a student ID. And we're going to equals what? But now what I need to do is I need to find that student ID. I've got the student name right here, but I don't want the student name. I want the student ID based on that name. So how are we going to find it? Well, we're going to use index to find that. We're going to do something like this. We're going to do equals index. What are we indexing? We're indexing the original student ID. That's what we want to know. And where are we going to find it? We're going to use match to find it. And what am I going to look up? I'm going to look up this, and I want to do this for every row, so it's not going to be absolute. I want to drag this formula down to all the students. I want to look up student name, I want to look up student names, and I want an exact match. So that's going to get us, and I want, of course, one column because that's the column. So that is going to get us our exact student ID. So once we have the match, then all I want to do is I want to get the row. Remember, I'm looking for the row. So how am I going to find that row? So again, I want to do the row of what? Of the attendance lesson ID. That's what I'm looking up. And then we'll do this 3 times, parentheses. And then if it's in error, we're going to use double quotes, okay? Now let's take a look at it. There we go. So we have that 3 showing up there. I'll just center that so we can see it clearly. And then what we do, so we have the 3. Now if I take one of those things out, if I take that out or I put something else, it's going to be, I want it to show up 0. So if all I need to do is change this to a different lesson, and we want to make sure that that goes to blank, and it does. If it's blank, then I know that I need to add this information to this attendance database. If it's not blank, then I know that it's already there. So we just need to add that in. Great. So now we're ready to write code. So that's the way I want it. Now all I need to do is just drag this down. We know we've got everything. So just drag it all the way down or double click on it. It's going to go let's bring it all the way down to the 102, all the way down, carrying this formula all the way down to, well, I think we got 102. All the way down here, there's our last possible. This we don't need. Okay, good. So we've got that there. That looks nice. We should probably bring the color down here black so that it's consistent all the way down here. Everything's consistent. All right, I think we're using this black here. Good. So now we've got this formula. So now as we add the lesson ID into the database, the row will appear automatically. So when I want to save this information, all I need to do is check here. If there's a row that's existing, all I need to do is, again, update that row with whatever changes we've made. If it doesn't exist, then I need to add it to the first available row right here in this case. So that's all we're going to do. So if I delete all this data, of course, it's going to go to blank. Right? So now it's blank. Perfect. So now we can automatically update this. So let's focus on how we would update this. Any changes to this, we want to actually update that database with that information. So that's done with just a little easy macro. So let's get into the VBA editor and just write a little bit of code on the worksheet change event. That's going to be on the scheduling right here. This is what we want to focus on. We don't have any code here yet, but we'll be writing some code. So we're going to focus on the worksheet and then change event because we want to make a change. Okay. All right. So what we want to do is once we make that change, I want to know, but we have to keep in mind that we want to differentiate between the changes. When I select this specific lesson, there's students that are going to load here. There's changes that are going to be made here. So I need to make sure that this specific change is not the kind of change unless the user actually makes a change. So I need to differentiate between those two types of changes. The best way to do that is just with an option here. I want to understand which one's going on. So we're going to use lesson load for that. Lesson load should go to true when we load it and then back to false. So that when we're actually loading it, we can know the difference. So let's make sure on the selection change that we're going to change D2 to true and then back to false when we're loading it. So let's write that up right now on the macro that we're focused on. That's going to be in this miscellaneous schedule, miscellaneous day view. Selection is the one I want to focus on, select. So I want to make sure that D2 goes to true and then back to false. So we can just set it right here, dot range D2 dot value equals true, and we'll put set lesson load to true, and then we're just going to back to false before we end the macro. So all the way down here at the bottom here, anywhere down here is fine. We're going to set it here. We can set it. Now we got B2 to false. So why don't we just change this to D2 as well, or modify that, and then we set schedule load and lesson load to false. So let's just take a quick look at that. I want to remind you now where schedule load is here in B2. Our lesson load is here. So when I click on the schedule, it's going to refresh that, and this will go to true to false. Lesson load. So I want to do the same thing, B2 in there. So, but lesson load specifically, I want to make sure that that goes from true to false. So now they're both false, which is correct. That's what I want to do. So set them both back to load, lesson and the schedule back to false, B2 to D2. Okay, so we have that. So now when we load that lesson very quickly, it's going to go from true to false. If you're keeping your eye on D2, it's going to go from true to false. That's what I want. So when we make a change here, I want to make sure that we understand that D2 must be false for that to happen. So we can write that inside the worksheet code event right here. Go back inside the schedule here. We can do that. So if not, we're going to make a specific change. What are we going to focus on? Well, I want to focus on changes that are made from anywhere starting with M8 here. M8, we're not going to be changing the students here, only M8 or N to 102 starting there. So that's what we're going to focus on. So M8 through N102, and I need to make a few conditions, right? And range, I want to make sure that L contains, L's where the student is, L, and the target row dot value does not equal empty, right? That's where the student is, so we need to make sure. What does that mean? Well, that means basically if they make a change to anything on here where there's nothing in L, then there's do nothing, right? There's nothing to be saved. There must be a student. So we need to make sure that there's a student there. And now, of course, I also want to now make sure that D2 is false. So we're going to write that in right now. And range D2 dot value equals false. Then I want to make sure that we have the attendance database, dimension the attendance database row as long. And also we're going to be looking up that employee ID. So we're going to dimension the found student as a range. We're going to use that to look it up. So first thing I want to make sure is if D in the target row is empty. And it means, what does that mean? That means I want to see if there's actually a current row here. Is there a current row? If it is, all we're going to do is updating the information here. If it's not, we need to create a new one at the first available row. So first we just need to check to see if there's a value in D. So we can do that if range D and the target dot row dot value equals empty, then what we're going to do is then it's going to be a new attendance database row, else going to be existing attendance database row. Okay, you get the point. All right, so if it's going to be new, what we want to do is create the first one. So we're going to say the attendance database row is equal to, again, it's going to be a, but we have to specify the database here, attendance database, and then that's going to be the first available row. Okay, so once we have that, then what I want to do is I want to determine the next attendance ID. So what is that next attendance ID? Well, we have that in a name range. Well, why don't we add that in here? So I'm going to put that right in here in the BHN. So we'll call this next attendance database ID. So we can track that. We can use the max formula for that equals if error. I'm going to use max. We have the attendance database, attendance ID here. So we're going to use the max of that plus 1. But of course, if it doesn't exist, we just need to put 1. If there's no data there, there's no data there. And then we can just color these rows, let's say green, and then just give it a border around here. So that way we can differentiate those, and we'll probably add to those. Okay, so we have that. So B18 is going to contain our next available attendance database ID. So we can put that inside the code right now. So we can say attendance database row, database dot range, A, and here's the row, attendance database row, okay, dot value is equal to whatever's in B18, range B18 dot value. It's going to be the next attendance ID. Okay, so we have that, but what else do we need to do? So what else do we need to do only for new ones and not for existing ones? Well, there's a few things. So inside this attendance, we're going to put the lesson ID. That's not going to change, so we might as well put that in. And I might use the row later on. I'm not sure, but I may want to use the row in reports and things in case we want to make updates. If we want to make updates, we'll need to know what row. If it's on another screen, we have it. So let's do that. Let's put in column B and column H on right now inside for only for those new transactions. So the B is going to be simply the lesson ID. So putting in B here is going to be equal to what's in range B10. B10 holds our lesson ID. B10 value lesson, not the class ID, but the lesson ID. And I also want to put the row in, and that's row is specifically going to go into, that's going to be the attendance, just simply putting that database row inside there. That's just simply the row. And of course, that's not in column A. I believe that's in column G. So we'll take a quick look at that and see where we put that H. It's where it is. So let's place that directly inside H here, change that to H. Now we have the 3 items that we need for the new. What about the existing? If it's an existing, we just need to get that row. Where's that row going to be located? It's going to be located right here. So the attendance, called the variable attendance database row is equal to, use shorter names. Okay, this is attendance database row. So we have that there. So it's either going to be the new one or it's going to be here. So attendance is going to be located in D in the target row. That's what's going to hold it. Now what we can do, regardless if it's new or regardless if it's existing, we can add the rest of the information based on what the user has changed. So we're going to pull it up from D. So basically what we need to add is simply the employee name. I want to add the employee ID, and I want to make sure we might as well add student ID if it is new or existing, but I want to pull up that ID to make sure we get that student ID. So how are we going to get that? Okay, so let's add that inside the code. So we'll start right here. So we're going to set that range. That range is going to be set here, the found student equal to, what is it going to be equal to? Well, of course, we're going to base it on the student database. So the student database dot range going to be the student name. We need to check that named range to make sure it's correct. Student name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run a find. And what do I want to find? I want to find whatever's located in L. Range L in the target row. L and the target dot row. That's the student name. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. And I'm also going to be looking within what? I want to be looking inside the values, and I'm going to make sure it's XL whole. So how do we do that? Comma, XL values, and then XL whole. I want to make sure the whole number, okay? Whole string there. Okay, so now that we have that, we can check to see if it's found. But let's double check the student name. We want to make sure that that is exactly accurate. That's the named range that we're going for. So inside the formulas and the name manager, let's click up student, and here it's names. Names, make sure it ends with an S. So let's make that update, and then we're good to go. Okay, so have student name. So now I want to see if it's been found. If not found student is nothing, then found. Then it's found. Okay. So once it's found, what I want to do is I want to look up that student ID. I want to put that student ID inside the attendance database. That attendance database is very important. So where are we going to find that? So where are we going to put it and where are we going to find it? Well, we're going to find it directly inside the student database. Let's take a look inside that database. In fact, we will bring it over here. It's all the way over here. Student database right here. Inside that ID, of course, is going to be located inside the first column. That's what we want to find it. So A and whatever the row is that it's been found on, we're going to return that. So we can do that. We can drag this over a little bit here and then bring it over here. Okay, so back into the schedule. That's where we're going to put it, and then back into the VBA. So we're going to put it, where are we going to place that student ID? I'm going to place that directly inside here, column D of that. That's where I want to place it. I want to place the name in column C. So we've already got the first two covered, but now we want to place the name and the ID inside here. So how are we going to do that? So again, inside the attendance, in fact, I can just copy this here. We're going to focus on C, which is going to be that name. C here is going to be the student name, is going to be equal to whatever is in L in the target row value. It's going to be located right here, L. So we can just copy and paste that there. That is going to be the student name. Next up, what we want to do is inside D, I want to place that ID. So here, place that ID. So this is end if. We need to close that loop. That is for the found or not found. End if. And then bring this inside a little bit so we can see exactly when we found the student. Found student. Remember, the double negatives cancel each other out. So we have found student is, we have not and nothing. That means it is found. They cancel each other out. So inside, in this case, column D is where I want to place that specific student ID. Where's it coming from? It's coming from the student database, and it's coming from column A. And where's that student row? The student row is basically this, the found student dot row. That's the row it's been found on. Dot value. That's the student ID. Now that we've placed the student ID in there, that's good enough. But what if we're going to make a change to the attendance, or what are we going to make a change to both the score? So now we have to update. Now we've placed everything inside at least the first four columns. So we've got all this information. I want to know if the attendance status has changed. We're going to place it in E. If the assigned exam or the grade score has changed, I want to place it in F and G. So that's what we're going to do. We've already also placed it in row. So now we just have to add these three things in, and then we're done. So how are we going to know if they've actually made a change to the attendance? Well, that's going to be a change in M8 through M102. So we can write some code up for that right now. So if 96, and we're going to focus on M8 through M102, M8 through M102 is nothing, then and if, then they've made a change to the student attendance. So that's going to be attendance change. Okay, so based on that attendance change, we can then make the update accordingly. So now the attendance database, we can make that update directly. Range E, that's where we're located in E. All we're going to do is just the target value, and we already know the row, the attendance database row dot value is equal to whatever is located in the target value. Target, right? If they've made any change in M, basically what we want to do is just update the row. So any change here in the attendance is automatically going to update here attendance status here. It's very simply, that's all we have to do there. It's just a single line of code is going to automatically make that update. Okay, but what if they've made a change to the actual, in this case, the exam or the score? So we can change that. In this case, it's going to be N8 through N. This is going to be called the score change. Exam, score, or grade change. Okay, so if they've made a change to either one of those, then we want to update two things. In this case, I want to update F and I want to update G. So both of those are going to get updated because F is the exact, it's not going to be target value. In this case, F is going to be the whatever exam or quiz that they've been selected. So that's going to be located directly here. Whatever, we'll add a drop-down list. So let's just say you call this final exam. It is this value. We'll get the whole XL. There we go, Randy. It is, let's fix that. Oh, we're not there yet. That's fine. We're not done with that. So F is going to take on M, right? So I want to know what exam to place in there, and I also want to know what score. So we're going to take that exam directly from M5. So that's what I want to do. M5 is we're going to be equals, in fact, this is going to be, G is going to take on the score, target value. I'm going to drop this down right here. I'm going to take this range M5 dot values. It's going to be exam, test, or assignment. And this is going to be the score or the grade. Okay, right here. So we've got that, the score to grade, and that's going to go to F. So the target value. So that means, again, if they make a change here, it's going to automatically go directly inside the score here in G. And then also we're going to put in whatever's F. We want to make sure that F contains a value. If it doesn't, it's going to create a problem. We got to exit out if it does. We got to make sure that they've actually put in a grade. We can't assign a score to no specific exam or no test or anything like that. So if M5 is blank, we need to let them know to do that first. So let's write something in before they change it. So we're going to do right here. If range M5 dot value equals empty, then let the user know. Message box, please add in an exam, test, or quiz before signing in a grade. Before assigning, makes sense. Well, you can't have a grade if you don't have a test. Assigning a grade, okay? So we're not going to let them update the database unless they first do that. And then what we'll do is we'll do range M5. I want to select that for them, M5.select. And then we'll exit out the select. Nothing else. Exit sub. Okay, good. So now we're exiting out. So we're just making sure that they have it there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to update that automatically. So E gets updated here in the target value attendance database. We wrote that down here. That's got to be okay, right here. This is for actually our attendance change. That's fine. Here's where we want it, directly here. So that means if they've made a change to end the exam score, then we're going to check to make sure that there is an exam selected. Otherwise, we're going to exit out. Assuming that it is, we're going to update both the test assignment and the score. Okay, good. I like that. That's good. Let's check it out, test it out, save our work as we've done before, and then any bugs, we'll go ahead and fix that. Okay, so now we've got an exam selected. We've got attendance here. Let's select attendance present. Okay, let's check it out. We'll put in attendance here. Let's put in present, and then we'll take a look inside the database. There it is. I like that. Everything's set now, and we'll notice that we now have a row here just the way you like it. Put in a score. If we don't have anything there, we try to put in a score. Then it's going to say please add in. What we should really do is clear that out. Don't let the student do that, and put it in because we can't have that. So let's put in final exam. Okay, and then now we can put in the 20. That's good. I like that, making sure both the final exam and the 20 got added in. Good. One more thing, I want to make sure that we are actually going to delete that, and then we can turn. That's important because I want to clear that out. If they've added a score, we want to do that right here. So here, they select before that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off events so they don't fire. So application.enable events. I'm going to make that false. Equals false, and what that's going to do is going to prevent it from looping out. So then we can do target.clear contents, and then application, we can enable it. Enable events again equals true. Okay, so what that is basically, why does that happen, right? If I clear the contents out here, it's going to say, oh, there's a change to n and whatever the target is. It's going to go back up here and say, oh, look, there's a change. And I'm going to come down here and down and loop and loop and loop and loop. And it's going to continue looping out. And that's some really bad things to happen. If you turn off the events, this won't trigger. And it will allow you to clear it. And then you can exit the sub. So we can save our work. So now back inside, now we can take a look at that. So now clearing this out, and we can clear that score out. So now when we put in 20, right, it's going to say, please add an exam before signing. It's going to clear that out. It's going to go back up to here, and it's not going to loop out. That's exactly what I want. Okay, good. So we now let's add in that again, final exam, and we'll do one more thing, and then we'll give it a score of 10. We'll make sure that it updates, and then also we're doing it. So now what I would like to do is have selection so I can select all students and add a specific present or absent with selected students. So we're going to do that. Okay, so let's put this one sick and make sure that notice the database row got updated automatically inside the attendance database here. Sick, final, everything looks very good. Okay, great. So now let's do this selection change. When I select this, I want all the students to be selected or unselected. And so that's going to happen with the selection change event. So let's go into that and take care of that right now. It's just a little bit of code. So why don't we go inside the scheduling here. Again, here inside the scheduling, we're focused on the worksheet change before. Now we're going to take a look at the worksheet change event. Well, first thing I want to do is I want to make sure if we select more than one cells, nothing's going to happen. So if target.count large is greater than 1, then exit the sub. It's going to help us avoid any bugs. So now that we have that, we can focus on, again, K7 is what we're going to be working on. That is this specific cell here that we're going to change over. Now, keep in mind that if we're going to be inserting this checked box or unchecked box, it's going to be basically based on these symbols here. So I'm going to focus on these two symbols. This symbol here, which is called character code, again, character code here 254, or this empty one, which is character code 168. So knowing those two character codes, 258 and 168, we can then make the appropriate code changes inside the VBA. So, all right, let's take a look at that now. Inside there, we're going to go in. So if not, intersection, we're going to focus on that's K7, then we want to do something. K7. What is it that we're going to be focused on? Basic on the current character, whatever character it is. But first I want to make sure that we actually have a lesson. I want to make sure that there is a specific lesson ID. Without a lesson we can't do anything. So I want to make sure that there's a value in B10. If it's empty, we're going to let the user know to select the lesson first, because we are applying that attendance and those scores to a specific lesson. So without that we can't move forward. So if range B10 dot value equals empty, then we want to do something. Then what I want to do, I want to let the user know, message box, please select a lesson before making attendance or scoring changes. And then now we can just exit the sub. Cannot move forward unless they have selected a specific lesson. Once they have, then we can do that. Then what I want to do is I want to dimension the last row. I want to loop through all of the students there. So we're going to dimension the last row as long. And we're going to determine that last row based on column L. Row equals, and then we're going to the last row on L. And we don't need to go this far. We'll just go with L103, 103, because it's not going to go beyond that. That's going to get us the last student row. If the last row is less than, let's say, 8, then we know that there's no students, right? So just in case, we also need to know if that right now, if the last row is less than 8, we know that there's no students. So we can move on. So we can do that if we don't need dot range here. So if the last row is less than 8, then what we're going to do, and if, and we'll message box, please make sure to apply these attendance, status, and scoring. We'll let them use that students are recorded, and scoring updates to lessons with students. Okay, good. So we've got that. The end with came up automatically on auto hotkey. We don't need that. Okay, so we've got an end if for that, and then we're going to exit the sub out of that, because I don't want to move forward if there are no students to apply that to. Assuming that there are students, assuming that we have selected a lesson, now we've got all of our properties. Now we can move forward. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to determine what the target value is. If the target dot value equals, again, character 254, then what is that? Then we know it's fully checked. Then we want to uncheck it. So then range, again, K7, I want to include the through K and the last row dot value equals character 168. Character 168. Okay, so now we've got that, but otherwise, else, in this case, else we're going to say range. We can just copy that and update the character here. This entire range here, range K7 through K in the last row, in this case is going to be equal to 254. So we've set it up so that's going to basically alternate it. And then I just want to select something else. I want to get out of that specific cell that we're selected on. So we'll do range L2, which is just the date there, L2, and then dot select. Okay, we want to just select a cell that the user actually has ability to change. We'll reset the code there, here, and then we'll move on, and then we'll save our work, and then we'll just go ahead and take a look and see how that works. Okay, so now when we select, we'll fix this. There's no L there. Oops, that's kind of important. Okay, missed the L. Okay, so now when we select and unselect, okay, and so that's perfect. All we need to do again is change that font to the Wingding. So I'm going to go all the way down here, change this font, go into the home, change that to the Wingdings font, which is what we want, and then I'll go ahead and center that, and then we've got a nice checkbox here. We could increase the font, but I don't want to increase the rows, so we'll keep an eye on that. If we increase the font and it increases the rows, I really don't want to increase the row height, so we can reduce that. It's fine the way it is. This one, maybe we can increase. So that's it. That's the way I like it. Look, it's selecting all those that are there. Okay, great. So what I want to do now is I want to apply those changes, and I want a little button that's going to apply any changes that we make. It's going to apply to all the selected students. So to do a button, how do we do that? Well, it's just a little bit of a button. All I need to do is just take an existing button and then copy that. So I'll grab this button here on today, and then I'll just change that, and then I'm going to update that. I'm going to copy and paste that, and then we're going to call that, we'll just call something simple like set attendance. So we'll keep it small because we don't have a lot of space. Set attendance. And then I'm going to reduce the font in this one. I'm not going to make it bold, and then we'll just do black, which is the consistent color for the text. Here, let's select on the shape and then click the black. And then I'm going to obviously remove that bold and then reduce the font to like 8 or 9 because I want to make sure that it's there, and then center that here. Okay, so I'm going to put that right about here, something like that here, and that looks pretty good. It's going It's going to be very small, which is fine. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. We've got a little more students. 0.65 is fine enough. And centered. Okay, so also what we can do, I think this button already has it, but we can check the text properties on that and make sure that we have no spacing around it. So don't think we do. It's 0 all the way around it. That's the way we want it. Okay, so we're going to set attendance, and what that's going to do is going to basically all of those selected students, whatever attendance you've put in here. So when we set the attendance, select here, select, let's say, sick, or select present, probably going to be more like present, for all of those students that are selected. But look, I also need to select or unselect here. So how are we going to do that? If I select anywhere from between K8 and the last row, I want to make sure if there's a value here to change the text. So let's do that right now. That's the selection change, back on selection change. This time we're going to be focused on if we select anything within that range, it's going to be K8 through K102, K8 through K102. Those are the individual students. So if we make a change at nothing, right? And I also want to make sure, and range L, I want to make sure there's a student there, and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty, then we know there's a student there. So if we can just copy this here and then make the changes here. So that's all I want to know here. Copy this. So now we're just focused on if the target value equals, then, okay, we're going to change this instead of all the row. We want to just change the target dot value equals character else target. Change this to target value. Okay, so let's take it. So if the character equals, then we're going to change to 1C8. Otherwise, back to 254. Okay, so saving our changes again, taking a look. This is how we make individual changes now. And the only other thing I want to do again is select L2, L2 here. So we'll add that in here. I do want to do the same thing that I did above. Now we can basically make changes to individual here. So now we can do individual students. So for now, what I want to do is run a macro that's going to loop all of that. I want to determine if there's a row here currently, then I want to save this information to this specific row, the attendance. If not, I'm going to add a row. So we're going to write a little bit of code on that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to this button that we just created here. So let's go back into the VBA and add that code in right now. So inside here in the schedule, let's say miscellaneous, because this will be for multiple views, whether it's day, week, we'll be using this. So we can do here, I'll just do it right up on here. So we're going to do sub, in this case, schedule, and then set attendance. Okay, so once we have that, I'm going to, again, dimension the last row as long and the student row. I want to know which, as we loop through the row, student row as long. Also, so the students are with the schedule. We're going to be focused on the schedule. And the first thing I want to do is determine the last row. It's going to be last row is going to be equal to, again, we're going to use L, column L for that, and we'll use L103, just as we did before, L103. And that's going to help us determine what the last row is, just as we did before. But this time we're going to be looping through those, so we need to go. So again, I want to make sure if the last row is less than 8, obviously there's no, then do what? Then message box, please make sure a lesson has same enrolled students before making attendance updates. Okay, fair enough. Exit sub. Okay, so now that we have that and we were sure of that, so for the student row, it's going to be equal to 8 to the last row. Okay, next student. Make sure we close our loop. All right, now that we have that loop closed, we can say if, again, range, dot range, K, we're going to focus on K and the student row dot value equals character 254, which is the selected character 254. Only for those selected we're going to be focusing on. Then what do we want to do? Dot range M and the student row. What do we want to do? I want to set that automatically. M and the student row dot value, right? So that's the student row. Then M student row dot value is going to equal what? It's going to equal basically whatever is in M6. Why M6? Because we're applying that student, whatever we've set here inside M6, we're going to apply it to those selected students here in M8 all the way through, only if they've been selected as we loop through that. So let's take a look. So equals dot range M6. It's going to apply attendance. Okay, so now that we've applied the attendance type, we just need to loop through those, and then we'll let the user know with the message box called attendance updated. Now that's going to update the screen, but not, of course, the specific database, which we're going to do now. Attendance updated. But we want to make sure we do this step first. Okay, and with, and then the sub. Okay, that looks good right here. Okay, so now we've got this specific macro here, and let's assign it to the button that we just created here. This is the button I want to assign it to. So we'll click assign macro, and then we can just paste that in there. Click OK. Okay, so basically if we select here, it's going to mark all these present, and then we get the message box saying attendance updated. Okay, but now once we've made those changes, I want to make sure that these get automatically updated. Let's make sure that that happens. Any changes there, it looks good there. Let's go back and change that. Let's make them all, let's only the selected. I want to show only Fred as sick. So if we set the attendance for Fred as, let's say, sick, and then click set attendance, it's going to mark that one sick. And we take a look inside the attendance database, and it's updated there, sick. Okay, good. We're really good to go now. I want to make sure that the score also updated, so just as we have here. And then if we set the score, let's say to 100%, he did good today, Fred. And then we attendance, now it's set to 100. Okay, great. So we've got the attendance all updated. That's looking really, really good. We also want to get these navigation buttons. I want to be able to move to today and click on the calendar and click on today and be able to navigate between days. But it's a little bit trickier because we want to make sure that we're not navigating based on the scheduling. So if we look at the scheduling, let's say I have not selected Saturday and Sunday. I only want to go through, let's say, Monday through Friday. I want to make sure that Saturday and Sunday are skipped. There's no reason to display a schedule on Saturday and Sunday if they're not even school days. So we want to exclude the day. So that's what makes it a little bit tricky. There's really two ways to do that. We can do it with a formula and VBA. VBA is probably a little bit simpler, but it's tricky because as we have to determine what the current day is, and then we have to look it up and see if that current day is Monday. And then if we get all the way to Friday and there's no days in the future, we need to move back up to Monday and check if it's checked or not. So let's write a little bit of macro to help us do that. All right, great. And this does remind me we have a current mentorship sale going on for just $7. You're going to get over 8 hours of content plus tons of downloads and the first 5 weeks of my mentorship program. That's a great way to start. No obligation, continue. $7 for that. And that reminds me there. All right, let's get into that. I want to go back in the schedule and focus on these. So we're going to write some macros on for that, for the previous and next, but I also want to know a few things. I want to know what the current day is. What do I mean by that? I want to know what the current weekday is. So let's put that somewhere. It's going to help us inside there. So let's put that down here. I'll call this current weekday. And what is it? And we want to base it on our current weekday. So let's keep in mind that our current day start on Monday. So remember that as we move on. So to get the current weekday, we're just going to use a little bit of a formula equals weekday. We're going to use that weekday. And what are we going to base it on? We're going to base it on this current day, the from date here. So I want to know that, and we also need to know what number to base it on. Now we want to go Monday through Sunday, which is option number 2 here, and we want that because our days also start on Monday. So we're going to choose 2 on that. So the current weekday is 6 because 6 is currently selected. At least what currently Saturday, Sunday would be 7. So that's perfect. That's what I want, and I'll give that a little bit of a color. Blue color. If we need any others specific for this date or this reason, we can color them, and then we can update them. All right, so now knowing that, we're going to have that, we can build that inside our VBA. So let's get back into the VBA and focus on, again, this is going to be specific to day view, these previous and next. So we're going to use this specific module called the day view, and I want ones for previous and next. So let's go inside with, let's start out with the previous, and then we'll move on to the next. So inside the previous day, we'll call this schedule previous day. So sub schedule and then previous day. All right, so we're going to need to dimension some things. I want to know the current work day. What is the current work day? And put that into a variable, a long variable, as long. And I also want to know the work day. As we loop through the work days, we're going to need to keep track as long. And also the previous work day. I'm going to need that previous work day as long. Okay, and also let's put in the current workday. Again, that's the one we just put in, the weekday. The current weekday is going to be equal to the schedule, the one we just put in, dot range B22. So that's going to currently 6, but so we have that dot value. That's the current weekday. I'll call this weekday, not workday. Weekday. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to focus mostly on the admin screen. So with the admin screen, I want to make sure that we have at least one workday selected. So make sure at least one because if none of them are selected, we have a problem. Workday is selected. So we can do that with worksheet function count A. So basically I want to count the entire string. So if we're going to do application worksheet function count A, that's the same one we use in the function there. And of course, why don't we set these as a specific named range, make it a little easier on ourselves inside the admin. And we'll just call this, I'm going to highlight that and we'll call this school days. School days. So now that we have that as a named range, we can use that inside VBA. So count A, we're going to do this. In this case, we're going to use this function and then we'll do school days, the same range we just created. And if it equals 0, then we know that there's no specific. Then we say message box, because if there's no days, we're going to make sure at least one school day is selected within the admin, and then we'll just do something like schedule setting. Let them know where it is. Settings screen. Okay, that gives them some direction. And then we're going to exit the sub. No days selected. We can't move on. Okay, assuming that we do have. So I want to know if we're going previous days, right? If the current workday is Monday, if the current workday is Monday, then what I need to do is I need to set it to Sunday because we're going previous. We're going back. So I need to first determine if it's there. If the current workday equals 1, then do something else. Else here. Okay, so what do we have? So first of all, I want to set the previous workday to 7, right? Because it's going to be 7. We're moving it to Sunday. So the previous weekday, should say weekday, equals to 7. And I also want to set the current weekday to 8, because that's going to help us in the math, and I'll show you how that's going to come in. Equals 8. Otherwise, right, if we're going previous, right, we're going to set the weekday just 1 less than what we have. So otherwise, if it's not 1, then all we need to do is simply say the previous weekday is equal to the current weekday minus 1. We're moving in the past, right? We're going previous, so we need to subtract. Okay, so now what we want to do is from the current, so now we want to set up a little bit of a loop. So from the current day, we're going previous, to Monday, right? It's in reverse, right? So if it's Wednesday, we're going in reverse. So we're going to go, let's say, from Wednesday to Monday. So we're going to say in reverse from the current day to all the way to Monday. Whatever the current work day is, let's say it's Wednesday, we're going to go to Monday in reverse. So how do we do that? Well, we could say for the weekday is going to be equal to the previous weekday to 1, right? We're going to Monday, days 1. And then we're going to step minus 1. We're going backwards in this. Close our loop, next weekday. Okay, so inside that loop, I want to check if dot range, we're on the admin screen, AY, that's our column for this, and what? And the weekday plus 3. Why are we adding 3? If we look in here inside our weekday, our first one, Monday, starts on 5, but we want to add 1, continuing to add 1. Actually, let's move it up. I want to move it up a little bit. So I think this is going to look better up here. I do want to move it up 1 row. So let's bring it up here, make it a little bit more consistent. Okay, I like that a little bit better. And then we'll just merge and center this the way we had it, because I want to keep those numbers the same and I want to keep it consistent. I like that. So that way these rows end up at the same row. Okay, so we're going to keep it then. We want to add 3. So the first one's going to be on 4. Okay, so continuing on, we've got that. Let's move it over here. So plus 3, the value, right? I want to check that value. Is it equal to character 252? That's the checkbox. Then, if it is, then it's selected. Then we know it's a continue workday. Then what I'm going to do is schedule, in this case, dot range, both the days. I want to set up both dates, B4 and B5, just in case, right? Because we're going to use those in the filters in the future. So I want to make sure that on the scheduling screen here, we're going to set the dates. Both B4 and B5 are the same date, which is going to be that date previous, because we know it's a work day. So we can go 1 day previous because it is a school day. So as long as it's a school work day, we can move on. So dot range B4, comma B5, dot value equals, what's it going to equal? It's going to equal the schedule, basically 1 day schedule, dot range B4 dot value, whatever the current is, minus, right, we're going to subtract. And what are we going to subtract? Well, we don't know how many work days there are. So we're going to subtract the current weekday minus the weekday. And basically what that's going to do is give us the number as we loop through those. Weekday. Okay, and then all I want to do is just simply refresh the schedule. Once we've changed the dates on that, we just need to, I know this formula gets a little bit confusing here. I know that, but this specific workday, as we loop through this, so we can just subtract out the current dates because we don't know. This is going to keep track of the workday. So as we move through the workdays, all we need to do is find the next one and then make that subtraction because we're going in reverse. So then we just need to update the schedule. So schedule underscore day view and then refresh. That's going to refresh the schedule. Okay, make sure to go to capital. We got the right one. Refresh schedule as we move through. Okay, good. So we've covered that from the current day all the way to Monday. But what if it's not? What if it's another one? What if it's about from Sunday? When we go to Sunday, we also need to cover that too. So let's go ahead to that. So now we've gone in reverse. So now we're going to focus on, in this case, from Sunday to current day, to the current day in reverse. Again, in reverse again, we're doing that in reverse. So let's do that in reverse. Okay, so how do we do that? So in this case, Sunday's 7, right? So for the work day is equal to 7 to the previous work day minus 1. Step minus 1. We're going in reverse. Next work day, next weekday. Okay, so we're looping through those weekdays. Okay, so again, we're going to run the same thing. Let's just copy and paste this. It's going to be almost exactly the same, so we don't need to rewrite it. So in this case, B4, if we're checking to see if it's checked. If it is, then again, the current workday minus the workday and then refreshing it. Okay, let's take a look at that. Now we've got the previous good, and we want to make sure that we're skipping out. So let's save our work. Let's go ahead and copy this here, and then we'll add that to the previous button in our scheduling screen, and we'll take a look to see if there's any issues. So here's the button here. I'm going to right-click this, assign that macro, paste that macro, and click OK. Now we'll scroll over here. We're on Saturday. It will go to, let's say, Friday. Great. All right, so we've got our fifth schedule. We just want to make sure, let's schedule, spell that right. And then we'll do end. We want to get out of that. Once we've updated it, we want to end, nothing to do further, okay? And then the same thing here. And then end. So once we update the schedule, we exit out of everything else. All right, great. So let's take a look at that and see how that worked out. Okay, so bringing it back in here, we're on here, go previous, we're on Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, and then we should skip to Friday. Perfect, that's what we want, right? So we're skipping those weekdays. Now, if I select inside the admin, if I select Saturdays, we don't want to, then we're gonna open Saturday. So again, going back, it's gonna go Monday. Now it includes Saturday, which is what I want. Perfect. Okay, now let's just write the macro that we just have to copy and paste and make a few updates for the next one. So let's do that right now. Let's write in that macro here. Update that here. Do previous, and we'll call this next day. So it's going to be relatively simple here. Paste it down here. This one we're going to call next day. Good. So now that we have that, we can go through this macro. Again, we still want to make sure that there's one day selected, but this time we're going to go in reverse, right? We want to go forward. So now I want to know if the current workday is 7, then what I want to do is let's call this the next. In fact, let's just change previous to next. So I'm going to update this. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to use Control F. It's going to find it. It's going to bring in this find here. And then what we'll do is I'm going to update. So anywhere it says previous within that selected code, I'm going to replace it with next, the word next. So that's going to update all the variables and everything there. Okay, replace all. Okay, I like that better. All right, so now we have next day, so next weekday. So now the current workday, if the current workday equals 7, then the next workday we're going to see equals 1. And also I want to set the current workday to 1, right? We're setting it back up. If it's Sunday, we're setting it back to Monday. So otherwise the next workday equals the current workday, in this case plus 1, right? We're increasing the days. So now from the current, now we're going to do from the current day to Sunday, not in reverse. So it's going to be going to Sunday, right? Current day to Sunday. And then what we're going to do in this case, we're going to do the current day here from Monday to the current day. So this is going to be from Monday, start of the week, to the current day. All right, so now that we have that, we're not going to be stepping one, so we can get rid of it here, and we're going to get rid of it here. We're not subtracting it. So this way, from the current day, from the workday equals the next workday to 7, right? We're moving to Sunday, which is day 7. If, of course, the day equals B4 and B5, we're going to change that. This time is going to be the schedule workday here. This particular B4 is going to be minus, in fact, instead of minus, we're putting plus, we're adding 1. And then this day, we're just going to reverse these. This time, all it is the work day minus the current day. Okay? So all we're doing is simply reversing it. I know it's a little bit confusing. The weekday, subtracting it out. So that's it. So plus, we're adding it up, the subtraction. So we can go through this step by step. Then we're going to schedule, then we're going to end. Okay, what about if it's Monday? We're going to go from Monday to the current workday. In this case, again, we're starting at 1, right? We're going Monday. Monday's day 1. We're moving through that. If, again, in this case, we're doing the same thing. This is going to be, in this case, we need to add 1 week. We're starting on Monday, so we need to add 7 in there because we're starting in the new week. We need to add 7 minus, in this case, the current workday minus the weekday. So it's reversed in here. So that's it. Then we're going to refresh the day. So let's save that here. Again, always save our work. Copy this, and then we'll see how we're doing. Moving it into this. Okay, so now this is the button we're going to focus on. Right click this, assign the macro, paste it in that. So we're on Friday, so it should skip all the way. Now Saturday's correct, but it should skip Sunday and go directly to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm going to go back to Friday. I'm going to unselect Saturday here, go back into the schedule and go. It should skip all the way to Monday. That's perfect. That's just the way I like it. And the class is refreshing here. Again, let's move these into a separate room. They're on the same room, bringing that in. All right, I like it. Going back and then drag with the drag and drops working really great. It looks really good. All right, very cool. What else should we do this week? So here's the button here. I'm going to right click this, assign that macro, paste that macro and click OK. Bringing it back in here. We're on here. Go previous. We're on Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, and then we should skip to Friday. Perfect. That's what we want, right? So we're skipping those weekdays. Now, if I select inside the admin, if I select Saturdays, we don't want to, then we're going to open Saturday. So again, going back, it's going to go Monday. Now it includes Saturday, which is what I want. Perfect. Okay, now let's just write the macro that we just have to copy and paste and make a few updates for the next one. So let's do that right now. Let's write in that macro here. Update that here. Do previous, and we'll call this next day. So it's going to be relatively simple here. Paste it down here. This one we're going to call next day. Good. So now that we have that, we can go through this macro. Again, we still want to make sure that there's 1 day selected, but this time we're going to go in reverse, right? We want to go forward. So now I want to know if the current workday is 7, then what I want to do is I want to set let's call this the next. In fact, let's just change previous to next. So I'm going to update this. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to use Control F. It's going to find it. It's going to bring in this find here. And then what we'll do is I'm going to update. So anywhere it says previous within that selected code, I'm going to replace it with next, the word next. So that's going to update all the variables and everything there. Okay, replace all. Okay, I like that better. All right, so now we have next day, so next weekday. So now the current workday, if the current workday equals 7, then the next workday we're going to see equals 1. And also I want to set the current workday to 1, right? We're setting it back up. If it's Sunday, we're setting it back to Monday. So otherwise, the next workday equals the current workday, in this case, plus 1, right? We're increasing the days. So now from the current, now we're going to do from the current day to Sunday, not in reverse. So it's going to be going to Sunday, right? Current day to Sunday. And then what we're going to do in this case, we're going to do the current day here from Monday to the current day. So this is going to be from Monday, start of the week, to the current day. All right, so now that we have that, we're not going to be stepping one, so we can get rid of it here, and we're going to get rid of it here. We're not subtracting it. So this way, from the current day, from the workday equals the next workday to 7, right? We're moving to Sunday, which is day 7. If, of course, the day equals B4 and B5, we're going to change that. This time is going to be the schedule workday here. This particular B4 is going to be minus, in fact, instead of minus, we're putting plus, we're adding 1. And then this day, we're just going to reverse these. This time, all it is the work day minus the current day. Okay? So all we're doing is simply reversing it. I know it's a little bit confusing. The weekday, subtracting it out. So that's it. So plus, we're adding it up, the subtraction. So we can go through this step by step. Then we're going to schedule, then we're going to end. Okay, what about if it's Monday? We're going to go from Monday to the current workday. In this case, again, we're starting at 1, right? We're going Monday. Monday's day 1. We're moving through that. If, again, in this case, we're doing the same thing. This is going to be, in this case, we need to add 1 week. We're starting on Monday, so we need to add 7 in there because we're starting in the new week. We need to add 7 minus, in this case, the current workday minus the weekday. So it's reversed in here. So that's it. Then we're going to refresh the day. So let's save that here. Again, always save our work. Copy this, and then we'll see how we're doing. Moving it into this. Okay, so now this is the button we're going to focus on. Right click this, assign the macro, paste it in that. So we're on Friday, so it should skip all the way. Now Saturday's correct, but it should skip Sunday and go directly to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm going to go back to Friday. I'm going to unselect Saturday here, go back into the schedule, and go. It should skip all the way to Monday. That's perfect. That's just the way I like it. And the class is refreshing here. Again, let's move these into a separate room. They're on the same room, bringing that in. All right, I like it. Going back and then drag with the drag and drops working really great. It looks really good. All right, very cool. What else should we do this week? All right, I'd also like to be able to select or unselect on these specific data items or label items and have it automatically checked. So let's take care of that right now. Very easy on selection change part of the schedule here. Here we are in selection change. So all I need to do is just pretty much add it. I can add it in here. Anywhere here is fine. So again, we can just copy this. In fact, I'm just going to copy this one here. It's going to make it a little bit easier, and we're going to update the ranges accordingly. So this specific range is going to be located between columns F and G. So we're going to focus on F. Let's take a look at that range and double check. We're going to put F5 all the way to G18. That's what we want to focus on, F5 through G18. So updating that, 5 through G18. All right, now that we have that set, we don't necessarily need this, that we're focused on the range. Then what are we going to do? If the character equals, again, 254, then we're going to change it to 168. But in this specific case, we're using a little bit different character. What I want to basically use 252, which is the checkbox, or just empty. Then the target value, we're just going to clear the contents out. So we're using 252 here. That's just the normal checkbox. Clear contents. Else the target value equals 252. That's just the normal check value. And then again, we're going to select L2. We always want that. All right, let's take a look at that. Okay, so now when we select on it, we can select and unselect this. Now when we update the schedule, we're going to do this. So for example, if we unselect class icon, let's take a look inside here. Notice that we have the class icon here. But if I select that, I don't want to show the data for that. This should be gone. Do you know what I mean? If I don't want to show data for class icon, we should hide this. If we hide this, then no icon's going to show up. So how do we do that? Well, we can do something like this, putting it right here. If, again, we can focus on F18, equals empty, then just show empty. Otherwise, then index for that. And then we can put the end parentheses right here. That way, we're only going to show that icon if it's selected, if it's not selected. So let's say we decide not to show the icons. All we need to do is unselect this. Then I just need to refresh the schedule and the icons will not appear. They're not going to appear here unless we select this. Very easy and very simple. Now also, what if we want to unselect this? We want to show just very limited information here. All we need to do, again, is just unselect a lot of this information. Maybe we only want the class name to show up and nothing else. We can do that just like this. Now when I update this, our text inside is going to update. So now it's only going to show the class name. Very easily, that's the whole point of this selection. Very easily just select on what the information we want to show. And maybe we want the labels, maybe just a little bit of information, and now we just show that. So now as we notice when we click here, nothing else, it's not going to show anything else. Perfect. Okay, I like that. Now what I want to do, a few of the changes. If I select on the class and I change this from 8:15 to 8:30, I want that schedule to automatically update it. Notice when we click it, notice nothing updated. It didn't update. When I select it, I want that change to be reflected inside the lesson database directly in here. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's on change event. So let's go back into that. Let's put the lesson database right here next to that. Let's go back to that and make those updates with some change event code. So we're going to basically, if we're affecting everything from here, so at least the teacher and this information, if I make a change to this, I want that schedule probably to be refreshed. But I only want the change to be done when I'm actually making the changes. Again, when we select here, we're making a change. That's why we have lesson load here. That's why we change this to true or false. So the only change that we're going to be focused on is that change when the user makes it, not the type of change where the lesson is loading. So we need to differentiate between that, and it's going to be a change event directly on the screen. So not selection change, but we're going to be focused on this change event here. So we can write that up here, right up here. We'll do it start at the top. So again, if not intersection, we're gonna, in fact, why don't we just copy this, because we're gonna need all that information right here. Pretty much this, and then we can just change the range and we'll go over it again. But the range, of course, in this case is gonna be focused on L2, that is the date of there, all the way through N5, all the way through N5. So we wanna make sure that in this case, N5, this is not important. L, of course, is not going to help us. And we do want to make sure D2 is false. All right, so let's put in a comment here. On lesson detail change, but not on lesson load. Okay, that's what D2 is false, because lesson's going to be load. Okay, so what do we want? If we're going to make a change, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we actually have some information. I need to know the lesson database row. So we're going to dimension the lesson database row as long, and also I need to know the lesson ID as long. And of course I want to know again the lesson shape. So we're going to dimension the lesson shape. If we want to update the shape, we can do that too, as a shape. All right, if B11 is empty, we can exit the sub. B11 is our lesson database row. Without that row, we can't make any updates. So B11 is critical. B11 is our update row. So if we got to have that before we can move forward. So I'm going to say if range B11 dot value equals empty, then exit the sub. Okay, so assuming that we have a value, we can then assign it to our lesson database row. So we can just copy this here and then assign it to our variable here. So we put in our lesson database row is going to be equal to B11. Lesson database row equal to dot range B11. Okay, so I'll put a note lesson database row. Now we have a row we can update. So once we have that, we can determine what change was made. So if for some reason, just in case, if the lesson database row is equal to 0, then exit, just to double check what it should. That's a double check. Exit sub. Okay, so now we know we've got a whole number and we can move on. If not, so now I need to know, are we changing? What if we make a change to our lesson date? That's going to be an L2. So let's determine if we've made a change. So if not intersection is the L2, then let's make a change. I'm going to update this to L2. In that case, we know then, in this case, it is going to be and if here. It's going to be the lesson date change. Lesson date change. Now, if we have the day view on, it's going to simply disappear if we change it. But if we're working with the month view, week view, it may still appear. So I want to make sure, and I also want to make sure that B, our lesson database, what are we going to update? Here's our lesson database. So if I make a change, I want to update column B. We already know the row, and now we know the column. So all we need to do is make that update. So again, lesson database dot range B, and our lesson database row is equal to what? Equal to our target dot value. That makes sure that we have it. All right, so we want to make sure, obviously we should probably check to make sure if it's a date. So let's do a check. If is date target dot value equals false, if it's not a date, then we need to let the user message box, please, we can use data validation for that, please enter a date. We got to have a date there, okay? Enter a date. Exit sub. Nothing we can do. I want to make sure it's a date. Exit sub. Okay, so now we know we're using the isDate function, making sure it's a date. Okay, continuing on. Lesson database row B in the database row is going to target value. Update the date. What do we want to do? Update. Then what we should do is probably update the schedule, right? Update schedule. Now, if we're going to use this, L2, change it on any type of a schedule, and we want to update that schedule, we should make sure it's a day view. So what do I mean by that? Also, actually we can update it beyond that. So we can update it after continue on, we'll make one. So now what if we make a change? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the schedule, but let's check for other changes as well. Okay, so all of this is simply on L2 change. So we'll bring that in. So we know that we've made a change to L2, we've made a change to that date. But what if we change another cell? So let's copy this here and make a change to another cell because we're making other changes. So I'm going to put a note here, lesson date change. But what about if it is on the room change? So lesson, it's called lesson room change, and room change is on what? Let's take a look at the cell that we're making the change on. Room would be directly the one below it, L3. So if we make a change to L3, then we need to update what? I want to update here inside our specific. Not only I want to update two things. I want to update our actual, our lesson database here. No, just one thing, lesson database in column H. That's going to be because they're specific for every lesson. So H is where we're going to be making that update. So we don't need this anymore. It doesn't necessarily need to be a date. We'll use data validation to make sure that it is a room. So in this case, we're going to simply update the column in column H. So here we're going to change this to lesson database update room. So that's going to be the room update. Okay, so what else? This is on room. What if we make a change to, let's say, our start time? Well, then we want to update this. Okay, let's do that. In this case, I'm going to copy this. And our start time, in this case, is located on our column I. Here's I. So let's take a look. It's I. Our start time located inside our database in column A. I is located in the exam. We'll be doing the exam right after this. So our start time is located in D. So that means if we make a change to our start time, which is going to be M3, we also want to update the duration, then I want to update that. So M3 is what the range we're changing. So we're going to change this to M3. This is, of course, on lesson start time change. And we're going to update the start time, which is in column D. Update start time. So we're making all these, and this is column D. So good. So we have these. Let's take a look. Let's put a little separation in there. It's kind of jumbled together here so we can clearly see them. Okay, this is all based on this. So also all based on L2 through N5. So we're focused inside that. And you can write some additional code if it's not clear. Lesson room change, so we can separate those. Sometimes the comments break it up a little bit. Lesson start time change, and of this is going to be lesson date change. So lesson date change. Okay, so we've got a few more to do. What about if we change the lesson duration? Lesson duration change. In that case, I want to make some other updates. The lesson duration is in N3. N3 is our duration change. We're actually making this change. Then what I want to change. So here, this is going to be lesson duration, and then update the duration. And the duration in our database, of course, is located right after that, and that's going to be column E is our duration. And that's going to be column E. So it's relatively easy once we get in N3. Double check that just to look so we're following up. N3 is our duration here. Inside our database, our duration is in column E. Perfect. That's just the way I want it. Okay, so we've got that N3 updating column E. Duration change. Is there any? What about the specific exam? I want to make sure that if we make a change to the exam, I want that exam also saved directly inside here in I. So we want to make a change to that. Any change to that. So I'm going to copy this, call this lesson exam. Okay, we want to change exam or anything else. Lesson exam change. And then, of course, that's going to be located right here. So again, we're making the change from I, and it's going to go, and this our exam is located directly in M5. So that's going to get that update here. So M5 is where it's exam, and that's going to affect column I. I is where that's located. All right, so this is going to be update exam, change this to exam, and then change this to exam 2. So we've got tracking everything. Every change we make is going to be tracked automatically. What else do we want? Okay, let's take a look. We've got already the date, the room, we've got the room type, and the start time and the duration. We've got the teacher. We need to update the teacher. The teacher is going to be located in L4. If I change that to a different teacher, I also want to update the teacher. Along with the start and end times too, we want to save that also in the database. So because we've got here the teacher in column F, and we've got the start and end times in L and M. So we should update those as well. So we can do this. So let's say lesson teacher change, and then also, of course, that is located here in, we're going to be focused on teacher in column F, and then updating directly from L4. So we can make those changes here. L4 is where our teacher is, and then of course that's going to be changed directly from M4. M4 is going to be handling that. M4, there we go, that makes sense. And that's going directly inside column L. L is our column where we're updating that teacher. So again, on teacher change, and then we're going to update the teacher. Okay, we got lots of notes. That's going to help us because it's a lot of code, so we want to make sure that we're keeping track. Okay, what about the teacher start time? Teacher start time, we have that, and we have teacher end time. Teacher end time. We want those all to go in the database too, any changes of those. So if not, the teacher start and end time, we'll focus on those. Start here is M4, end time is N4, M4 and M4. So M4, we need to update this. The teacher, lesson teacher change, that should be L4, M4, N4. We'll look at that. L4, M4, M4. All right, let's take a look at that. Make sure we don't get confused. L4 is a teacher, M4, and N4. M4, and then one more, and then N time is going to be N4. Okay, we've got all those. Now we just need to focus on the columns. So we've got column L for the teacher change, and then the start and end times are going to be located in column M and column L. L and M for those. Okay, L here, and then M here. That we've got it up, and then we just need to update the notes accordingly. So both here and L and M are going to be updated, and they're going to be updated all directly on. And that's going to be it. We're going to be able to then make the update and run the code here. We'll just update. These are not room changes. Let's call teacher start and then teacher end time. Just we actually need to copy this. I've got it here twice, but it's kind of helpful. And then also here, this is going to be the end time. Okay, we've got a lot of notes of the same notes, but every little bit helps because it's a lot of code. So I want to make sure that update end time, and the one above is start time. All right, a lot of code written there, but it should look good. I'm going to save those changes before we run our code. Take a look here, make sure we got our last end if, which we do. But the last thing we want to do probably is update that schedule. But I don't want to update if it's day view. How do we know if it's day view? Here's our day, B3. If B3 is day, then update the day view. Because if I make this change, right, and I've selected something on a week view or a month view, I want to update the month view. So we want to make the updates according to what view is visible. So if range B3 dot value equals day, then schedule day view and then refresh. I believe that's it. Okay, that looks good. Okay, I'm going to save again, and then we're going to go in and we're going to make this changes. So let's say we want this teacher here, we want to change it to John Jacobs here, and then that's going to update there. Perfect, and then I'll select it there, and that's good. Okay, let's take a look here under, let's sort by teachers. Let's do it by teachers, and I want to make that change. Let's make sure we made that change. Filter, if I make a change to teacher, I want that update to automatically update, right? So that we can easily see. I want to, on change of J11, I always want to make to update this. So let's do that right now. I'm going to do that right now because it's much easier. On change of J11, assuming it's not empty, I'm going to put that right here. If not, intersection J11, if there's a change, and range J, I'm going to put J in the target row because that's kind of less buggy. Target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Then again, schedule day underscore day view and then refresh. Now, as soon as we make that change, it's going to automatically update accordingly. So now when we change it to teacher, it's going to automatically update to the teacher view. That's just what I like here. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, so now let's say we want to make a change from Lisa to John on this class. So we'll select that class. We'll change it to, I guess, in this case, John Fred here. And we want to update that schedule. Now I want to make sure that updates schedule. Oops, we messed up a column. Let's fix that. Let's take a look at that. Where's that wrong column? Let's take a look here. Okay, teachers are on F. We need to update that. Okay, that's pretty easy. Just to update the teacher changes to F. Let's take a look now. Going back in here and back in the schedule now. Selecting on here, changing it over to John Fred. Okay, good. Like that. And then we'll change it over to John Jacobs here and then update the scale. Selecting on it first, and obviously we got to select on a lesson, changing it back to John. Okay, good. So now we've got teacher change. That's looking good. Let's make a change to the start time, making sure that changes to 9 o'clock. It moves to 9 o'clock. Changing the duration here to 2 hours, it's going to automatically update it. I like that. Okay, great. Now that we've saved all this information, the attendance and the scores and everything else in the lesson database, everything is saved here. But what I want to do is I want to bring it back. I want to bring this exam. I want to bring back all of these scores here, all this information here inside the, from the attendance database. I want to bring this in. It's very, very simple because we now know the row. I know the row from the schedule, right? We know the row. It's stored on 6, 7, right? So all I need to do is loop through all the students and determine the row and pull the information in. We can do that with just a few lines of code. And where's it going to be? It's going to be on our lesson selection here, our select. When we select that, that's where we want to do. So all we have to do is just scroll down here, probably assuming that there are students. So before we do that, let's just write it in simple. So we're going to say bring over attendance and test score. So once we've saved them, we want to bring them back over when the lesson loads. So again, we need the last. Okay, we know that our students are coming all the way over to the last results row, right? We're bringing that information over here. We're bringing those formulas here. The last result row plus. After we bring in our students here inside L, bringing in our students, I know the last row here. So all I need to do is take that last row and do a loop. So all we're going to do is bring this in here. So we're going to do schedule row, making sure that we already have it for schedule row equals, starting at 8 to the last results row plus 5. Next schedule row. So basically I want to loop through all the students there and then bring in the information. So first of all, I want to check, is there a row? If dot range, again, let's go with the schedule dot range D, that's where our row would be, and our schedule row dot value. If it doesn't equal empty, that means there is a row. Doesn't equal empty, then we do need to add it in. Then we're going to put in lesson detail row exists. So we have that row in the database. So now we can bring over the information. So all we do is need to assign it to a variable. So why don't we just add a variable up here, because I know we don't have this one yet. So I'm going to put here inside this select here. Right down here we'll put it as long. So we'll put this attendance database row as long. Okay, so now this specific variable is what I'm going to use to determine whatever is in D. So this here is going to be equal to whatever row is in here equals this. And that's going to be our attendance database row. Okay, so assuming we have that, now all I want to do is bring it inside schedule. Inside M, M is going to take on our attendance status. M and the schedule row dot value is going to be equal to whatever is in our attendance database dot range. Where's it coming from? Let's take a look. So basically inside M, what I want to put here is going to come directly from here. Inside our attendance status, coming directly from E. So that's all we're going to do, is bring it in directly in there. So attendance range dot E and the attendance database row dot value. That's the attendance status. Okay, and then all we need to do is just bring in the test score that got associated. So that, of course, is going to come inside N. N is going to take that on, and it's coming directly from, in this case, it's coming from G. Our score is coming in G. So we're going to take that and bring it directly in G. So all we need to do is just update that to G, and that is going to be our score. Okay, so there's it. That's it. It's very, very simple. That's all we need to do to bring it, because we've already got the row. We've already done the hard work with the formula, and that's all we got to do. Okay, all we need to do is just save our work and then go ahead and take a look inside the schedule and load the lessons up and see how that works. So bringing it in here, let's select on a specific one, schedule row. We need to update that. Let's just update that here, add in that in. I thought maybe we had that value, but we don't. As long, okay. I thought it might exist. Okay, continuing on, variable not defined, schedule, adding this in, schedule row. Always forget the D. Don't know how I mentioned that. Okay, now variable. Okay, got that. Those are all the instances. That looks good. Now everything loads up. Let's add in a test score here, and then select something else. Select a class again, and then selecting class. Now everything is saved perfectly. And we got a 115 on here, selecting another class, going back. Now all of our scores and everything's going to load up just perfectly. Very nice. That's exactly the way I want it. All right, just two more things and I'll let you go. I want to click on this today. I want to do that. That's just a 2-line code. So let's go ahead and write that inside our schedule day view here. We've got that. So now all we need to do, we've got the previous and next all the way up here. And under those here, I'm just going to do today. So right here, sub schedule, and then just put today. So that's going to be very, very simple. All we need to do is just simply write a little bit of code to do that. So what's it going to be? Well, the first thing is I want to change B4 schedule dot range. I'll just do B4 and B5 here. B4, B5 dot value equals date, and then all we need to do is schedule day view refresh, which is the macro right below it. So all we need to do is just copy this right down here and paste it in here, and then this is the macro that we're going to assign to that button. That's going to set it to the current date. Okay, so we've got that. Let's just assign the macro there, paste that in, click OK, and click today, and that's going to automatically go to the previous day, May 16th. Okay, I like that. Now what I want to do is there's a few different filters. The last thing I want to do, and then I'm going to let you go today, not as long, which is going to be nice. So again, when I make a change to here to all students or all teacher or teacher, I want a specific only those teachers or only those students or only those rooms to show up. And of course, when we make a change here, we already got that set up here. All right, good. So I want to make sure that we have those filters set up when we change it. Now, those filters are based on the lesson database. So for example, all students in J5, it's going to be based on here. So the lesson database is where that criteria is going to come up. I want to make sure that we have those here. So we have teachers here, we have students. I want to make sure we've got the true or false. Let's double check these formulas just to make sure we're looking at them. And then we're going to run them. All we need to do is just run the macro to refresh that automatically. So it's super simple. So I'm going to change this to just a specific teacher, a specific room, so I can check in all of those filters almost to make sure that they're all set up correctly. So now we've got them changed. And now we go into the lesson database. So we've got the dates already. We've got the teacher ID, which is correct. We've got the room correct, subject, the type, and the student is true. Okay, good. So they're all set up. So I like that better. And then also we can reset those. And then what we'll do is we'll run a worksheet change event on any of those changes and just simply refresh the day because we already have them linked by their subjects or by their types with formulas, so the criteria is automatically linked. I like that because it's linked by formulas here. So all we need to do is just run a simple change event. So that's going to be located inside the scheduling here, the schedule here, and then we're going to run that change event. It's going to be based on specific changes inside there. So we can write it, actually, let's write it up here, and then we're going to call it on. It could be for any schedule, filter, change, update schedule. And also what I want to do is remember we're going to run this for month and week, so I do want to check. So when we make a change, so this is going to be a change anywhere between, well, let's go ahead and take a look at that specific range that we're going to focus on. Any change between J5 and here J9. So between J5 and J9, those are the changes that we're going to be focused on. So change this to J5 through J9. If we make any of those changes, then want to do something. So if, again, range B3 is day, right? Only on the day view, because if I make those changes on a month view or week view, I want that to be equals day. Then what do we want to do? Schedule, again, refresh. So all the day view and then refresh, underscore refresh. That's the macro that we're running. Okay, so now any change that we make on that, going to save our work and we'll double check. So now if I want a specific teacher, let's say I only want, let's say we have only want Lisa Smith or John here to be, we can just do that. So I change that here to, let's say, John Fred here, and only that John Fred will show up. Oops, a little bit of a mistake here. Let's take a look here. All rooms, we got 3 L's in that, so that's not going to help here at all. Okay, so we've got that, so that's not, so let's update that because we need to do that. That's going to be a little issue there. So inside the admin under the types, we got a little bit, so we can fix that under classes and scheduling. I want to fix it, make it correct. Again, let's take a look at all rooms here, get rid of 1L here, and also I want to make sure that we have inside our lesson database here, just changing this to all rooms. That looks better. So now when we go back into the schedule, all rooms, we can select the right one here. Going back into the lesson database, it's now empty. That I like too. Now we make a change to John Fred and it shows up here. Okay, good. I like that. Changing it to, let's say, Lisa Smith, scrolling over to make sure that only Lisa's class was done. And now let's do a specific, we can do a specific subject or something like that. And then we can show that. So I like that. We can now really, so now all teachers are going to show up. And what if we only want to show a specific subject, math or chemistry or English? We can do that. So if we want to change this to, let's say, chemistry, only chemistry is going to show up, or only math is going to show up, and then only history is going to show up, or English, we have that other one. Okay, good. We've covered a lot. We have shown you how to add these filters in and hide the filters and display specific filters on it. We've also showed you how to update lessons and update either through here. And we have also added, let's fix this back to the all subjects. We've also shown you how you can navigate between the days just by adding and skipping, of course, school days, and of course, updating the lessons here. Also, updating the attendance and the scores on students using a select all or updating specific. We've been able to update the attendance very, very easily, just setting an attendance here and then updating it Fantastic. It's been a great training. Next week, we're going to move on to the week view. We've got so much to cover. I really appreciate you sticking with us on these trainings. I've got 175 of my best workbooks. It's on sale for just $66. That would help us out a lot. Don't forget to the mentorship program. That's only $7, 5 weeks, up to 8 hours of training. No obligation to continue. I'd really appreciate if you can give that a look. I've included the links down below, so go ahead and check those out. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.